Hello everyone, welcome back. This is video 4 in the Computer Science and Introduction to Java video series. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to teach you 3 new things, and we're going to use the code we wrote in the last video about the quadratic equation to just enhance that a little bit more, and I'll show you a few other things. So the first thing is if, else if, and else. So I covered if else. If you're in one situation, run a block of code, otherwise run another block of code. Else if is if you're in a situation where you have 3 blocks of code and you want to run the first block if you're in a certain situation, else if the second block if you're in another situation, else the third block if you're in the if you weren't in the first 2 situations. So I'll describe that. I'm going to teach you how to debug. You always have little problems with your code, and sometimes they're hard to find. So debugging is the process of finding your bugs and working through your code to make sure it's working perfectly. So I'll show you how to do that. And then one of the golden rules of software engineering is dry. Don't repeat yourself. And so since it's so important in programming and computer science, I wanted to introduce that concept earlier. And through these, we'll fix up our quadratic equation program so we don't repeat ourselves. We'll debug. I'll purposely put an error in there, and we'll debug that and find it. And then I'll show you the when you're in a three situation, how to do the if, else if, and else. And let me just describe the 3 situation while I have this equation here. So there are 3 outcomes for x, and they have to do with b squared minus 4ac. If that is positive, then you have 2 answers for x, which is your normal situation. If it's 0, you can see a plus or minus 0, you're just going to have 1 answer for x. And if it's negative, you're going to have no real answers for x. So those are the 3 situations. We really only covered 2 in the last lesson, so I wanted to add this third situation and show you how to do that else if. Okay, so let's head over to the computer and I'll show you those things. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to basically start with the code we wrote last time. I have it here before edits, and I created a new one here. And just as a reminder, so we have 2 situations, either the situation where there's a solution or no solution. But what I'd like to do is better handle the situation where there's 1 solution. So I wrote a spec for that. And so there are 3 situations. These are the first 2, and that's what it should look like. And then the third one is if the coefficients are, if it yields 1 solution, like in this case, if it's 1, 2, 1, it should just say the solution is. And I'll show you what our program does right now. So if you run it, and by the way, the reason this always clears is I picked an option that says clear screen at method call, so you might want to do that as well. So if you put in 1, 2, 1, you can see the solutions are, and it shows the same number twice, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but I think why don't we clean it up, and I'll teach you one thing in the meantime. So basically we have 3 situations, not 2. So that's where you need the if else in the middle. So we'll just move that down, and what else if means, else if looks like this. Else if parens brackets. Okay. So between the parens you put your new condition or your second condition, and between the brackets you put the code that you want to run on that second condition. So we have the situation where it's greater than 0. It's going to show the 2 answers. Now we want the situation where equals 0. So I'm going to copy this, put it here. And in Java, when you want to find out if something equals 0, you actually use a double equals. And the reason is the single equals is used for the assignment statement. So assigning a value to a variable. But if you have to do a comparison, it's actually 2 equal sign in a row, as strange as that sounds. But that's more like the math equals, actually. So it's 2 equal signs. So if that equals 0, then we want to print out that prints a free line. The solution is. And then we want to calculate it, and then we want to show it. Okay, I'll straighten out my code. Okay, so that should work. We have an if, an else if, and then an else. Which usually goes on the same line as that bracket. Okay, so 3 situation thing. Now this has a bug, which I told you I was going to do, and we'll see that in a second. Okay, so we do 1, 2, 1, and you can see it somehow is not working. So it's still showing 2 different solutions that are the same. So I'll show you how to debug that. So the way you debug is after you compile your class, then you go to, in the margin here, move this over, in the margin on the first line of code or wherever you want, you click and you'll see a stop sign. That stop sign means you want the BlueJ to stop there and allow you to inspect the code and see how it's working. Okay, so once you do that, when you run it, you can see it stopped there. Your code came up, it stopped there, and then this new panel came up, the debugger panel. And what this allows you to do is actually see your code running one line at a time. So you hit step, and that line of code runs. You can see it said enter the coefficients of your quadratic equation. You can see it down there. You do step again, and the next line of code runs. You step again, that runs. You do step again. And in this case, that line of code is asking for the user to type something. So you go down here and you type something. Okay, step again, type something else. 2, step, step, 1. Okay. Now, now what's important is you want to see which lines of code run. So you do step. And somehow this first condition became true even though we were in the second condition. This b squared minus 4ac should equal 0. And it's not. If you wanted to know what a, b, and c are, if you scroll this down, you can see it actually shows your variables. A is 1, b is 2, c is 1. So that worked out. And we know b squared is 4, 4ac is 4 as well. So it should be 0. And so it shouldn't have run this line of code. It should be down here. So you can see the bug actually was in this condition. It caused, this should say greater than 0, not greater or equal to 0. So these are mutually exclusive conditions. So that is the bug. So basically what you do is you terminate. So you get rid of the debugger. Go here, we'll double click to your code, fix it. And now we compile again. I'll leave the stop sign on so we could see it run. Okay, let's just step through. Actually, what you can do is put the stop sign here and then just do continue and it'll run to the next stop sign. Okay, now it's looking for answers. 1, 2, 1. Okay, so now it ran to the next stop sign. That's what continue does. And now what we should see is it should not run these lines of code. So if I do step, perfect. Skip that whole block. Now if I do step, it should go into this block. And it does. The solution is, and I'll just do continue to run to the end. The solution is -1. Perfect. Okay, so that's basically debugging. So watching your code run, and to stop it, you just get rid of these stop signs, or you X out of this panel. Okay, so now we have a working program. The last thing I wanted to teach you is the dry principle. Don't repeat yourself. And the best way to figure out if you are repeating yourself is if you're using copy and paste. So copy and paste is not good when you're writing code because you may be copying a bug from one place to another. Or at least it might be code you want to enhance down the road and you have so many different copies of it, it would be hard to find and enhance. So let's take a look at where we're repeating ourselves here. I think the biggest problem you can see is we use this b squared minus 4ac 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. So one way to not repeat ourselves is we can just do the calculation once in another variable. So you may remember from math that's called the discriminant, that b squared minus 4ac. So what you can do actually is calculate that as a new variable called discriminant and just use that variable instead of the calculation everywhere. Not an easy word to spell. Okay, so we'll put it here, put it here, put it here, put it here. Okay, so that's good. So we just calculate that once. If we made a mistake there, we just fix it in the one place. The other thing you see that's simple things like printing out stuff might not be the biggest issue, but the other thing you see is answer 1 is duplicated twice. It calculates answer 1 twice. So we can just take that out of the condition and just do that up here. Okay, and take it out of here. Oops, we got to show it. Oh, no, that shows it. No problem. Okay. So now we have calculated the discriminant once. We calculate answer 1 once. Only calculate answer 2 if needed, right there. And then I think it's good. Let's try it. What we're going to do is we're going to try all of our test cases. So I'll move the Word document back up. Okay. Right click, main. Okay, 1, 3, minus 4. Good. Test case 2. One, 2, 3. There are no real answers. And then lastly, 1, 2, 1. The solution is great. There's a few little things to fix up. There are no real answers. Should have a line feed in front of it. Capital T. That should be a little s. And we got a nice consistent program. Okay, so that was it. Let's go back to the board and summarize. Okay, so to summarize, we covered 3 things. So if you're the if, else if, and else. So if you're in a situation where you just want some code to run sometimes, it's just an if statement. If you're in a situation where you want one block of code to run or another block, depending on the condition, use an if and an else. And then if you're in a situation where you have 3 situations where under certain situations run, or this situation run, or that situation run, then use all 3. And actually else if can be repeated lots of times. So you might say if like your grade is 90 or above, print an A. If it's between 80 and 90, print a B. Else if it's between 70 and 80, print a C. Else if it's between 60 and 70, else print an F, that kind of thing. So you can keep repeating this else if in the middle between your if and your else for 3 or more situations. Secondly, we learned to debug. So basically the way you do that is after you compile, put a little stop sign in your code, and then the code will stop there. And then you use that debugger panel to step through your code. So you keep hitting step and it'll go 1 line at a time. Or if you want to skip a bunch, you can actually put a stop sign later, hit continue, and it'll go all the way down to that stop sign and stop again. Okay, so we learned step and continue. And then in don't repeat yourself, Java and all programming languages have lots of ways for you to not repeat yourself, for you to put code all in one place. And the one technique we used here was we used variables to calculate things just once. So we used that discriminant variable to take that calculation and just do it in one place and then use it throughout the rest of the program. So that's a very common thing to do instead of cutting and pasting a formula or a complex line of code. Okay, so hope that was helpful, and I'll see you next time. Bye.